Welcome to Latter Daily Digest. Today we have a reappearance of Joe Geisner. We're doing our Sunstone sneak peeks, and Joe is involved in two presentations, and we talked with him early in the week about
Writing Mormon History 2, and in the Sunstone presentation on Friday is Connell O'Donovan, Alice Faulkner Birch, and Bruce Van Orden, and possibly a fourth, but she'll be, if we get her, she'll be a surprise for everybody.
Surprise, yes, another tease
a surprise guest, yes.
Who could it possibly be? No. So anyhow, and then also on Saturday, and what time?
Saturday, Grace was kind enough just to put me 24 hours, so people didn't have to put up with me less than 24 hours. But 24 hours later, Saturday from 12:20 to 1:20. I'm actually, this is just me. I'm doing a paper on lost documents.
People present papers, and at sometimes a following year or another time, or just published in the Sunstone magazine or whatever, would be like somebody critiquing your paper. That might happen in the past.
It has in the past, like when I did the paper, you sort of, if you don't mind going, this is a good introduction because I was thinking we would talk about this. I have a thing for the stuff that I'm like a little kid who, that candy bar that I've heard about, but
the Wonka bar.
Yeah, but I don't have access to for various reasons, is the candy bar I want. I can have my Three Musketeers in front of me, or Reese's, or Snickers, or whatever. But no, I want that one, the one that I can't get my hands on. So the paper I did at Sunstone, actually, it was my first paper that I ever presented at Sunstone, was on the censoring of conference addresses. The censoring of Boyd K. Packer. Boyd K. Packer had given that talk and had said the horrible things about queer folk, and he was ultimately censored. Had some words and phrases removed from the talk.
That's the one where he approved of an elder hitting another elder because the person approached him in a solicitation sort of a style.
That's his little factory talk, and you and I were just our little factories were just starting to work at that point, when Packer gave that talk.
So that was nuanced enough that they didn't have to take that out.
Well, that's a weird talk, and I actually, in my paper, I actually write a little bit about it, because that talk is found, and to qualify for my definition of a censored or redacted talk, was it had to be published in the conference report, and then after the conference report was done away with, it had to be, and there was only just a few years when I did my paper, that then it had to be
in the era,
in the ensign. It had to be, and now, obviously, now we don't even have the ensign. It would be whatever it's called, the Leahona or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd have to, but so Packer's little factory talk was in the conference report. It was not in the ensign, but it actually got more play than if it had been in the ensign, because it was made into a little pamphlet and it was, I think it was called "To the Young Men Only" or something like that. It was
that reminds me, when we were young, in my ward, we had like a stand that had maybe 5 or 10 pamphlets in it, that either visitors or members could go and grab a pamphlet to read up on some topic, read somebody's talk. And do you remember those ever?
Oh, yeah, right. Well, and then we gave them out as missionaries as well, right? Like the Joe Smith story and and I don't remember. But anyway, but for young men only, I remember being in that stand, and so it actually got more play than if it had been in the Ensign. So I did not count that as well. There's no way that talk would be a censored or redacted. No, the one I'm talking about is it was whatever 2005 or I don't know, something like that. It was when he gave that talk, and it was a horrible. But then I don't know if there's one Boyd Packer talk no, there's one Boyd Packer talk that's actually a decent talk. It's about the new doing away with wards raising their own funds and everything coming through Salt Lake. And the vision that he had of that was actually a pretty good vision, that it would make basically wards equal, that there
Right.
would be no rich or poor among you, basically idea. And
Right. But
it's
what
actually
happened is that everybody became poor because they
yeah,
got so tight with the
that's
funds.
right. But when it first started, the idea was actually a pretty good idea, and Packer really laid out that vision, and it's a really good talk, and the only place you can find it is in Sunstone. It was never published by the church. I think it was a regional rep talk or an area authority talk, something, I don't know. But beyond that, to me, all the rest of his talks were either very boring or very hateful.
And then your paper probably included that talk that where he had to re-record it in the early 80s.
The Pullman
Pullman.
talk. So that's in there. The fun one, which you've been dealing with, Daniel Rector, his father, Hartman Rector, did a talk, and his is maybe one of the more interesting talks in what it not only for the censoring of it, because it is heavily, heavily censored. Um, and it's a very hateful, spiteful, anti-abortion, anti-women, anti, all kinds of crazy ideas. Hartman
One thing
really,
about whenever Hartman Rector spoke at conference is you couldn't sleep.
yeah,
You
yeah.
couldn't
Well,
you couldn't you couldn't rest while your eyes were watching it on the publicly broadcast thing because he
right.
was going to be so fiery and so say things
And
that just made you wide awake to hear.
and this talk is a very, very hateful talk, and they turned it into as I like to say in my paper, an upbeat family talk. I mean, it's but anyway, the editors, meaning the editors, because it appears Rector had nothing to do with the editing
Mm.
of it, and the censoring of it, and but anyway, it's a really interesting talk, and so I go into detail. I was lucky enough to get the original version, which actually was given at BYU a few months before conference. And anyway, it's the talk that also got Lavina Fielding Anderson fired from the ensign. The ensign. She was one of the writers for the ensign, and she got fired over that talk. So it's got an interesting history to it, and I was able to get the original a version that was later. The version was okay. He submitted a version that they wouldn't allow him to give, and so I was able to figure that out of what that talk entailed, and that was the talk that he gave at BYU. Then he wasn't allowed to, so he watered it down, and then he gave that version, and I've got that version in my paper,
And then it got
and
edited.
and then the fully edited one, obviously, it was published. So anyway, so
Yeah.
that's clearly I have an affinity for these kinds of things. So I did that. Then I did a paper where I looked at the redactions that the church did, meaning the church historical department, the published, and it's published online, the George Buchanan journals, but I was able to get some years that were unedited, unredacted. I compared that with what was ultimately published, and did and talked about the redactions. And it was actually it turned out to be a very positive talk. I explained that the historical department, even though I'm not big on the redactions, that the redactions were pretty light-handed, actually, for the George Buchanan journals, but they still redacted some things that would have been fun left in. That would have been fun left in.
Important historically, maybe we'll say.
And important historical, right? That's right. So then this new paper that I'm presenting at Sunstone a week from yesterday, actually, I'm going to talk about lost documents. And when I say lost documents, again, my parameters are that we have to know that the document existed. It can't be, well, I heard rumors that Joseph Fielding Smith, this was Eldred Smith saying this to Todd Compton, that and Eldred was a character. I got to meet him, and he was a fun guy. But Eldred had a tendency of exaggeration, let's say, and he liked a good story.
And Eldred was the emeritized.
Right. When we were little kids, he was the church patriarch, and then he was put on emeritus status. Yeah, that's right.
No patriarch since him.
And then no church. Right. Exactly.
Right. Church general authority patriarch.
That's right. His son Gary lives I think in Utah now. He was a very successful attorney in L.A. A brilliant guy. Gary's a wonderful person. Did a great book on the office of patriarch.
Probably you can find in that book that Joseph Smith Sr. was the very first patriarch of the church, and when they were, I think, ordaining all the officers, when they first realized that, we should have a Melchizedek priesthood and have a structured leadership program, that position was the first that got ordained or set apart as.
And he also sat on the top podium in the Kirtland Temple. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, the office of patriarch. Well, and Joseph F. Smith had his brother John Smith ordain him to be president and prophet of the church, because the Smith family believed that the most important office in the church was patriarch to the church. So yeah, there's the dynamics there. And my friend Irene Bates, who passed away quite a few years ago, she and Gary wrote the book together and did a fantastic job. It's called I'm not sure what it's called now. Gary Smith and Irene Bates. So okay, so anyway, so my paper is on
right. So back to Eldred, he said he heard of a document.
Oh, right.
But he didn't see it. If he had seen it, you would include it.
Yeah. He said he watched Joseph Fielding Smith, his cousin, go to you remember how we used to have those? My grandfather called it an ash can, and you would burn, and he would take all the papers in the house and he would take them out, or cardboard, and put them in his ash can.
We call them incinerator.
Yeah. And so there was an ash can behind the church administration building, and Eldred claimed that he saw Joseph Fielding Smith out there burning papers. Now, I don't believe that at all. I do not. And
we mean burning important papers.
You're right. Yeah, it wasn't garbage.
Unimportant papers.
Yeah, it wasn't junk mail that he'd gotten. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it wasn't junk mail. It was supposed to have been, and so anyway, so Eldred, like I say, Eldred was not the most trustworthy witness, in my opinion. No, I'm talking about a good example, and the example I like to give to people is the 116 page manuscript of the Book of Mormon. We know it exists, and the reason we know it exists is because we have multiple witnesses who said they saw it, meaning Emma Smith, Joseph Smith himself, other family members, Martin Harris. Now, again, we all like to look at those those exact people's credibility when it comes to the plates. But when it comes to a document like this, it's pretty clear that it did exist. There was, enough discussion about it.
Is Lucy Smith quoted? Harris.
Lucy Harris. Yeah, I think she does. I think there's something where she even says, that she had nothing to do with, and as far as I know, the blaming of her, and the little bit I've looked at, the blaming of her is spurious at best anyway. So, it probably had more to do. I think there was some relative or friend that probably took it. But anyway,
That's a great example, though, of a document that
that's
does no
of a
longer
lost.
exist, but
That's
everybody
right,
knows.
of a document that we know that existed, and now we don't know where it is. We either and the examples. I think I have 16 examples or something like that. Those examples, I have at least 4 or 5, maybe more, that where the account actually describes the burning of those papers, which is sort of sad. That and there's some really sad stories. I'll give you one example right now. It's the Oliver Cowdery papers and his wife and daughter. And remember, Oliver Cowdery's wife was Elizabeth Whitmer. She was David Whitmer's sister, Peter Whitmer's sister, Christian Whitmer. So she was married to Oliver Cowdery, and Cowdery passes away in Missouri, and so Elizabeth and the daughter Mary, I think is her name. They're very poor, and they're going from house to house. Cowdery really didn't have anything when he left. When he died, probably all the funds had been used up. So it was sad situation. And David Whitmer writes to Mary and Elizabeth and asks if they have any of Cowdery's papers. He wants the seer stone, that actually went to Phineas Young. Cowdery gave, because Cowdery's sister was married to Phineas Young, Brigham Young's sister. And so Phineas Young, when he was in Missouri, he had asked for the seer stone. He wanted the seer stone. This is the brown seer stone, the one that the church publicized a few years ago. And so David Whitmer, wanted that seer stone. And Mary writes back and says, "I'm sorry, Uncle Phineas has the seer stone. My mom, and she just describes about her mother giving it, or her mother remembering, it being given to him." So then she says, "And by the way, the trunk that had all my father's papers, we had to burn because we just couldn't travel around with it anymore. They just had nothing, and it became so burnt, and the trunk was falling apart, and it just tragic." Well, now this is speculation on my part because we don't know the contents of the trunk. Okay, we don't know all that he had in there, but we know from the historical record that Oliver Cowdery wrote a an early history of the church, and that has always been the holy grail of historians to find that. Mark Hoffman claimed that he had seen it. He claimed that the church actually had it and that the church was lying. And it talked about salamanders, and it talked about a bunch of other magical stuff. And I know what. Oh, that was the other thing that Hoffman claimed. It talked that Alvin Smith, the Joseph Smith's oldest brother, the one who built the frame house, the one who told Joseph Smith, when he was dying, to make sure and do what the angel told him. Well, Alvin, according to this Cowdery history that Mark Hoffman was making up in his mind, that Alvin was the true prophet, and that because he died, then Joseph Smith Jr. then became
Right. The mantle fell in
right.
the
Well, this
family
was
of
all made
Joseph.
up. Again, this is all from Hoffman's brain creating this. Okay, we don't know what's in that history. We have no idea what's in that history because we don't know where that history is. Now, and again, this is my speculation, that history was probably in that trunk that burned up, and
Right.
that's why
So
it's
you're
never
saying
been.
Hoffman may have been making up things as a precursor to him creating things that he could sell to other people.
That's what he. Oh, right. And so yes, that's right. That's he. Yeah, yeah. And he was just he's a psychopath, and so
Yeah.
he you know um
Yeah.
he
I was
is a
going to say, if
psychopath. He
only
is
he wasn't in prison, we'd be able to get the 112 missing pages eventually from him.
116, right? And
116.
maybe he would, I don't know, who knows if he would have even come up with a cap. But he claimed that and what he did was, see, he leaked that to his press sources, and so then the press was then
Start a
writing
rumor.
articles about that the church actually had the Cowdery history. And so that's an interesting thing, that we've got this evidence, that Cowdery's papers were destroyed, by his wife and daughter, that they burned them. And I wanted to say that I need to thank, and I do in my paper, I thank Mike Quinn particularly, for help assembling this paper. When Mike found out I was interested in doing a paper like this, we emailed back and forth a few times. Thank goodness, and I saved those emails. I'm so grateful. But also, we talked just about 2 months before he passed away, and so that was actually the last time I ever talked to Mike. He and I spent a couple hours talking, and he, well, we talked about everything under the sun probably, but we talked a lot about these documents. But the exciting news is that Mike's diaries have now been made available by Beinecke Library at Yale for research. And so Brian Buchanan is working on that, and he's really helped me through Mike's. Because it's funny that I brought up a couple of records that Mike actually said he didn't know anything about. Well, come to find out, he recorded in his journal that he was the one who actually discovered that these documents were lost.
And he just forgot.
So, yeah, he had forgotten about it, which was amazing because Mike never forgot anything. But anyway, so Mike, I have to thank Mike, and so I do that in the beginning of the paper. I also thank Cheryl Bruno and Brian Buchanan, because the paper has actually just sat there, and I've done nothing with it for since Mike passed away. So for these years since Mike passed away, I just left it.
Right.
And
So in a way, it's another tribute to Mike.
that's right. So Cheryl and Brian both got after me, and so I wrote and gave a much shorter version of the paper at MHA, and that was fun because I had Rick Turley there, and um, I can't remember the other people, but there were quite a few people that either worked for church historical department, or who've written books that have included references to these lost documents. So that was fun to have them sitting there in the audience. I was really hoping they could add to my list, and that's what I'm also hoping. So if there are any people viewing this that know of lost documents, please contact me. You can contact me through Gene, or if you're going to be at Sunstone, if you don't come to the session, please at least find me and tell me about any of these documents, because I want to keep adding, and I know the list will keep growing. But again, the parameters. I've had lots of people who will say, "Yeah, I heard about this," or and so I'll do a little investigation, and there's just no evidence so far, that those documents even exist. So it
That's
had
right.
even existed. So, like the story of Eldred,
Right. And there's even
So
more that you're going to present. Do you have a full hour's worth, or are you going to present
I have a
for
full hour, and so I could probably take the full hour in what I've written, but I will stop at about at least a good 15-20 minutes so people can
Q&A?
comment. And yeah, at the at MHA, we had because there were three of us presenting. Cheryl presented on William Marks, John Dinger presented on William Marks, and then I presented my paper. So there was a lot less time. But in this session at Sunstone, there will be the full hour.
Sounds good. Okay, everybody that is within ear of Joe's voice, or that stumbles upon this podcast somewhere, check out Joe's presentation and find out more about lost documents. Sunstone is from the 1st to the 3rd in August at the University of Utah. And hopefully we can see everybody there, and like and subscribe, and have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.